September 26, 1950. The Golden Gate Bridge rises out of the morning fog. San Francisco is waking up to an ordinary Tuesday in the post-war boom. Ferries cross the bay. Cable cars climb the hills. Office workers pour into downtown. No one notices the Navy minesweepers cruising several miles off the coast. No one sees the hoses mounted on the decks of those ships. No one knows what is about to be sprayed into the air they are breathing. The ships release a massive aerosol cloud of bacteria into the coastal fog. The cloud drifts over the Golden Gate and settles across the entire Bay Area. It covers San Francisco and Oakland and Berkeley and Sausalito and every town in between. The bacteria rides the wind for miles inland, invisible and odorless and tasteless. It enters the lungs of children walking to school and workers waiting for the bus. It settles on hospital patients lying in open wards with their windows raised to the breeze. It drifts into operating rooms and maternity wards and newborn nurseries. The bacterium is called Serratia marcescens. The Navy chose it for its bright red pigment that makes it easy to track. When the bacteria grows in a petri dish, it forms colonies the color of fresh blood. The military scientists believe it is harmless to humans. They are wrong. Within days, doctors at Stanford University Hospital notice something unusual. Patients are developing Serratia marcescens infections in alarming numbers. The infections are appearing in places Serratia has almost never been documented before. Pneumonia, urinary tract infections, bloodstream infections, wound infections. 11 patients are hospitalized at Stanford alone with confirmed Serratia infections. The doctors are baffled. Serratia is a soil bacterium. It does not normally infect humans. They publish their findings in a medical journal, describing the outbreak as unprecedented. They do not suspect the military because they have no reason to suspect the military. No one tells them the truth for 27 years. Edward Evans is a 75-year-old retired pipe fitter recovering from prostate surgery. He is being cared for at Stanford Hospital, breathing the open California air through his window. Serratia marcescens enters his lungs and colonizes the tissue weakened by his age and condition. His body cannot fight off the infection. He develops severe pneumonia that does not respond to any antibiotic available in 1950. His family watches him deteriorate over the course of several weeks. His lungs fill with fluid, and his fever spikes, and his organs begin to fail. Edward Nevin dies on November 1, 1950. His death certificate lists pneumonia as the cause. It does not mention the Navy. It does not mention the hoses on the minesweepers or the cloud over the Golden Gate. His family buries him believing he died of natural causes. They will not learn the truth for nearly 3 decades. Edward Nevin was not the only victim. He was only the first who was documented. Researchers in the 1980s reviewed hospital records from the period of the experiment. They found a dramatic spike in Serratia infections across the entire Bay Area. The spike lasted for weeks after and then returned to normal. The correlation was undeniable. The bacteria cloud had caused the outbreak. No one connected the dots because no one knew there were dots to connect. Operation Sea Spray was part of a larger program that had been running since 1949. The military conducted 239 open-air biological tests across the United States. They sprayed bacteria over San Francisco and St. Louis and Minneapolis and Key West. They released simulated agents in the New York City subway system. They sprayed the Pentagon itself with bacteria to test building vulnerability. They exposed their own citizens to biological agents without consent or notification. The tests were classified at the highest level and hidden from Congress and the public. The program continued for 20 years before it was shut down in 1969. The truth began to emerge in 1977, 27 years after the San Francisco spraying. A Senate subcommittee on health held hearings on the biological warfare testing program. Surviving military officials were called to testify under oath. They admitted to Operation Sea Spray and all 239 tests. They admitted that the citizens of San Francisco had been used as unwitting test subjects. They admitted that the bacteria they released was not as harmless as they had believed. The hearings made national headlines and triggered a wave of public outrage. The citizens of San Francisco had been exposed without their knowledge or consent. The military had conducted a biological weapons experiment on an American city. Not a simulation, not a model, a live test on a live population. The revelation changed the laws governing human experimentation in the United States. New regulations required informed consent for all government-funded medical research. The Nuremberg Code, written after the Nazi doctors' trials, was formally adopted as U.S. policy. The biological weapons program itself was dismantled and banned by international treaty. But the question that lingered was not about policy or law or international treaties. It was a simpler and more terrible question. Did the military know the bacteria could kill before they released it over San Francisco? Declassified documents from the program provide an answer that is difficult to read. Army researchers had conducted experiments with Serratia marcescens years before Operation Sea Spray. They had injected the bacteria into laboratory animals and observed the results. The animals developed severe infections. Some of them died. The researchers had also documented human infections from accidental laboratory exposures. They knew Serratia could infect human tissue. They knew it could cause disease. They released it over a civilian population anyway. Edward Nevins filed a lawsuit against the federal government after the 1977 hearings. The case was dismissed. The government claimed sovereign immunity from prosecution. The family received no compensation and no apology and no acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The Navy has never formally apologized for Operation Sea Spray. The government settled a separate class action lawsuit with other victims' families in 1981. The settlement did not require the military to admit liability or wrongdoing. The victims received payments but no admission that what was done to them was wrong. Edward Nevins' grave sits in a cemetery in Colma, California, just south of San Francisco. There is nothing on his headstone about the Navy or the minesweepers or the cloud. His family knows now. They have known since 1977. They have spent decades knowing their father was killed by his own government. The Serratia bacteria is still alive in the soil of the Bay Area. The bacterium established itself in the local environment after the 1950 release. It is now part of the San Francisco ecosystem, carried by wind and fog. Everyone who has lived in the Bay Area since 1950 has breathed its descendant bacteria. The biological trace of Operation Sea Spray will likely persist for centuries. San Francisco still has foggy mornings when the Golden Gate disappears into a gray-white haze. The fog looks exactly the way it looked on September 26, 1950. It is beautiful and mysterious, and it hides things that most people do not know. The tourists who photograph the fog from the viewing platforms do not know the history. Joggers on the bridge do not know what rode the wind on a Tuesday long ago. They breathe the same air that carried the cloud, and they do not know. But now you know, and that has to be enough. The government that did this is the same one that outlawed it. The reforms that followed Operation Sea Spray are real and they are binding. No American city has been used as a biological test site since 1969. The protections that exist today exist because someone finally asked what happened in San Francisco. But Edward Nevin cannot benefit from those protections. He was recovering from surgery at 75 and breathing the California air. He died because the military needed to know how far a bacterial cloud would travel. He died for data, and the data was classified for 27 years. His name is not taught in schools. His story is not in most history textbooks. But his lungs absorbed what the Navy released, and his death is part of the record. The record is classified and denied and settled out of court. But the record exists, and now you have read it. Edward Nevin. November 1, 1950, San Francisco, California. He did not enlist. He did not consent. He was not warned. He was breathing, and the cloud found him, and that was enough.